Hello everybody and thank you for watching us today. We are going to change the topics that we wanted to speak about. At first it was to be about Egypt and the role of this new country with entering BRICS very soon. I think it's at the end of the year, the official entering. But with the event in Israel and with Hamas, we are going to modify slightly the topics to still speak about Egypt, but more about the Egypt and the relation with the whole area and how they could influence the situation around the other countries, like, of course, Israel. So, about Egypt and the modern Egypt. Prata, I'm giving you your 5 minutes.
In order to understand modern Egypt, I thought that it was very interesting to pick up the Suez Crisis, or so-called also Second Israeli-Egyptian War. So the Suez Crisis was a complot between France, Britain, and Israel to attack Egypt and take control of the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal was an impressive piece of engineering created by the French with French and Egyptian capital. It took 10 years to build from 1805. In 1875, Egypt has a kind of bankrupt, and the government of Egypt is obliged to sell its share on the companies to the British. Actually, most probably through not so complying ways, like always, no? So in 1882, Great Britain decides to occupy Egypt. Egypt is actually de facto an independent country with its own coin, its own rulers, its own government, but it belongs to the Ottoman Empire. But it is de facto independent, which is quite interesting. At the same time, what the strings is Britain occupies Egypt and never really annexes Egypt. So it's in a way, it's like a protection from a de facto independent country. It's a very strange situation, which created a lot of constant problems. In 1922, the British, understanding that the political situation in Egypt was too confused, they declared Egypt independent. So the Declaration of Independence of Egypt is not made by the Egyptians, it's made by the British. And the British, in that independence declaration, reserved for themselves the communications, the monopoly of communication, military, and even Sudan. And of course, the control of the Suez Canal. In 1951, the Sultanate of Egypt somehow declares, abrogates the control of the Suez Canal by the British. The British actually ignore it and keep being there like they is. The Egyptians want them to go away, they don't go. And in 1952, the British actually shut down 41 Egyptian policemen or auxiliary of policemen, and this created a huge political flame in Egypt, a lot of demonstrations. Several British citizens were killed on riots, and which brought up that in 1952 there is a revolution in Egypt. So monarchy is put down, and a very interesting young man called Nasser comes to power. This young man and experience, he will become one of the most important figures of the post-Second World War. And it's quite impressive the way that his career, how he made and how he was able to navigate such a difficult geopolitical way. So we are actually on the beginning of the Cold War. The British, the French, and Americans try to convince Nasser that he should join the kind of Western alliance against the Soviets. And Nasser, not even just coming to power, not knowing much about it, he says, why should I care about someone that is 5,000 kilometers away and ignore that you, the British, are here with your rifles on my land, controlling us? How can that be logical? And actually, this is quite impressive because in 1955, out of nothing, so Egypt Nasser appears in the Bandung Conference, and the Chinese leaders, Wu and even Tito, were very impressed with him. But they actually noticed that Nasser was a bit naive, and they called Nikita Khrushchev, and told him, "Well, this is a good guy. You should give him some credit. He has a lot to learn. You should try to go and communicate with it." So Nasser, in a way, didn't want to have problems with Israel. Actually, at this time, Egypt controlled Gaza, and they tried to block the frontiers so that the fighters against Palestinian fighters would cross the border to fight Israel. He did that for a while, until Israel had the very unfortunate decision to attack the police station, the Egyptian police station in Gaza. And since then, Nasser started to let them do whatever they want. The thing is that the British started to create a kind of a pact with France, because France was having problems in Algeria, so the Algerian people was trying to get their independence, and Egypt was actually giving them some help. So France also enters in the equation, and in October, 29th of October, Israel occupies the Gaza Strip. The French and British troops make an ultimatum to Egypt to do a ceasefire. So Egypt lost land and has to do a ceasefire. Of course, he ignored it. And what did the British and the French do? They were prepared. They occupied the whole Suez Canal. But of course, Nasser, which you will prove later, a very intelligent man, he sunk 40 ships inside of the canal. So in a way, the Egyptians were defeated, but the canal was useless for everybody. We have to see that what happened here, what this crisis also mean, which is very similar to today, is that we have declining powers and the emergence of new powers. So France and Britain, which used to be the big powers in the globe, are declining, and the United States and the Soviet Union are the emergent powers. And the Americans are not very happy with the situation. They actually told the British not to do it, but the British made everything behind the backs of the United States. And the United States reacted like this: if you don't get out of the Suez Canal, we'll actually sell all your bonds in pounds, and you'll have a huge economical crisis. So in a way, very bluntly, the United Kingdom and France indirectly were told, you don't have anything to say anymore, which is what makes. On the other side, we have Nasser, which will understand that the best way is to play these powers one against each other. So in a way, they wanted him to play against the Soviet Union, and he says, I'm going to stay neutral. He wants to buy weapons from the United States, but ends up buying weapons from Czechoslovakia, and later it will receive weapons from the Soviet Union, would never enter in any of those sides. So it's like a cooperating neutrality, and this is what will make actually Egypt all the time. It's like a pleasure to play the big ones against each other, and they stay behind laughing. So this would be my interpretation. I would say that Mubarak, the other president, I always forget his name, although he was a very important person, Anwar Sadat, and Mubarak, and even Sisi today, they always follow this line. They play both sides one and another and try to find their own way, their path, which is not always visible. And when it comes to matters, they already did it. So nobody really knows where the Egyptians are going to. So this is my point. Nasser had, as you know, in 1967. He lost a lot. He lost a lot of territory, almost the whole Sinai, for Israel. It was actually Sadat that was able to kick out the Israelis from Sinai with a lot of help from the Soviets. Actually, with the Soviets, they were flying the aircrafts, but they didn't want it to antagonize Israel, so everything was made in a lot of secretness. We see how Mubarak, nevertheless, also maintained a kind of non-alignment position, but cooperated with everybody. And we see Sisi that now entered, nobody was expecting, that now entered the BRICS, asked to join the BRICS. So in a way, it's a country that has a lot of power that is not always recognized. You see, we can't definitely measure the power, the military power of Egypt by the number of population or the number of equipment. There is much more behind. And also the geopolitics of Egypt is one of an enigma somehow. So they always... They are in the basis of the Arab League. The British wanted to create a kind of an Arab nation, and Egypt wanted based on Jordan monarchies and Syrian monarchy, which later will fall. Then Nasser will create a kind of Arab nation, which will still hold for a couple of years. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years or so. It broke. It's true. But it's Egypt that is always the center of the decisions somehow. And we also see how Egypt has a very special relationship with Saudi Arabia, although they are in many cases completely apart. Egypt also somehow maintains it's a kind of a military society without being militarized. It's also a society that is pretty much non-religious in terms of politics, but at the same time they go well with all the religious groups around. There is something though that Egypt really has a problem with. It's the Muslim Brotherhood societies. Hamas, as we know, is one of those Islamic Brotherhood societies. And Egypt really has a problem with it. They try to kill Nasser. Actually, on the end, they managed it through some religious fundamentalists. And also Sadat was killed by some Muslim fundamentalists. Mubarak was pulled down by Morsi from the Islamic Brotherhood, which made it hold much, because for the military this was unsinkable to have the Islamic Brotherhood ruling the country. And that's how Sisi, which actually has a much harder hand than Mubarak or Nasser ever had on its population. Nevertheless, Sisi is very, very popular within the Egyptian society. So that was it. Shadowi?
Okay. So the question I'm going to ask every talker now is this one. Do you think Egypt is powerful politically or military in the local region. Do they have some specific strength to use in this local region? So first, I'm going to let Coping speak because I think he has a few things to say on the topics.
Actually, Makiadi, I'm sure.
Yes, please let Makiadi go first, and then I'll,
Okay.
because I think he can address that a little bit more specifically.
Oh, at first I thought, Prata, you're gonna skip over Mohamed Morsi. I was like, what's happening? Morsi doesn't get Morsi doesn't get a mention, but that was really awesome, Prata, by the way, and you mentioned some things that I was not actually aware of. I actually forgot how Nasser died. I think he was poisoned, but you're saying it's the Muslim Brotherhood that did it, right?
Islamic fundamentalist.
Oh, okay, probably, okay, yes. And well, in terms of Shadowi, what did you ask? What was the question?
What's the strength of Egypt, military or political, in the local region?
Are you already
Okay.
recording? Are you already recording?
Yes, I'm recording.
Yes. So, well, I first of all, I knew obviously that Egypt had a bigger military than Israel, as we had spoken before the recording, and that would be obvious, right? Because you have a population of Israel, I think, has 9 million, but Egypt has like 100 million people. So, that would make a difference. That doesn't mean that in the battlefield that would, apply automatically, but they are indeed a powerful country. They are a powerful country. If you have 100 million people and you're not able to build a military that would actually reflect that advantage, then, somehow you're not doing a good job. But yeah, they are powerful. They're definitely a force to reckon with. But politically, as Prata had mentioned, they try to stay as neutral as possible. They have done the same too. They don't have like they are like, what do you call it? Like the intelligence services are not very active, especially in African countries where you'd think they would be active. For example, Sudan and Ethiopia. They're not that visibly active for a country which is as big as it is.
Okay.
I would say that Egypt has a lot of diplomatic channels, very discreet ones, and this is like the way that Egypt actually portrays power in the region. It's not like an actor that is always neutral and quiet in its corner. They actually are acting. We saw that in Libya very recently. Egypt is not a neutral in that conflict, but it doesn't appear like acting. Actually, we heard more about Russia interacting in Libya, although actually it was Egypt and Turkey doing the bid.
And don't forget about the crisis in Sudan and the water problem with Ethiopia. During the civil war with the civil war. In Sudan, there is always a civil war. It's very sad, but there has been a crisis where some Egyptian pilot has been taken hostage by one of the part of the civil wars in Sudan, and I think very quietly they have been given back to Egypt with no problem.
Wait, that just happened? I didn't actually hear about that. When did that happen?
At the beginning of the new Sudan civil war.
Oh.
There is a military base in the north, somewhere here. And
whose side was that pilot
there
fighting
was some
for?
airplane, and the pilot was training the Sudanese Air Force, some kind of instructor, if you want. And they have been, there were a photo of the pilot exactly just in front of the airplane with the military, I think it was the Global Force, who were basically threatening them. And Egypt was not happy at all about this photo. But I think since we don't hear about it, I think the situation has been resolved very quickly. And
the thing about
I think
Ethiopia,
Prata or the new Makiadi could talk about the crisis with Ethiopia about the new dam, where they are blocking the water for the Nile.
Well, the dam, the problem, the conflict with the dam was, well, Egypt is creating a huge project, $10 billion, which is actually quite cheap for what they are going to achieve. They are creating an artificial delta to the western side of the Nile Delta with an artificial river, and they will increase the arable land of Egypt of about 20%. It's a huge project. And of course, they were preoccupied about the fact that the Ethiopians were building the dam. Building the dam is not as much as the problem as the Ethiopians were not willing to work with the downstream countries to talk about the project, how they would phase out filling the dam and so on. You see, the many of these rivers in the northern part of Africa, like in many other rivers in Central Africa as well, is that they are seasonal. So there is a moment when there are heavy rains in Ethiopia or in Central Africa, when these rivers increase their enormous amount of water, which actually not always good for the downstream countries because they tend to take everything with them. So actually having dams actually creates a kind of a more controlled flow stream. But nevertheless, Ethiopia didn't want to talk about anything, so Egypt had to make some kinds of threats. They would go there and destroy the dam. Of course, Egypt was not going to do that, but it worked. The Ethiopians ended up sitting on the table and somehow presenting the plan to fill out the dam. Of course, they wanted to fill up the dam much sooner because this is also a question of development for the country. They will have much more arable land. They will have electricity to increase their industrialization. Actually, one of the most fast industrializing countries in Africa at this moment. Yes. And but in a way, it's like I said, Egypt normally tends to solve things through discrete diplomatic channels, and they are very good at it. I think it's a very charming. I don't know if any of you guys had the pleasure of meeting any person from Egypt. They are very, very charming, very well dressed normally. Of course, not everybody, but quite often they are very well dressed, not like Syrians, but very well dressed and very, very charming people. And that's like if we talk about Egyptian-Israel relationship, they have been actually better than it was portrayed to be. So Egypt actually has more or less a good relationship with Israel. They allow Israelis go to Egypt to have vacation, to go see the pyramids, like everybody loves to do that, we know. And for instance, when this problem in Gaza started a few days ago, there was even some Israelis being killed in the streets of Cairo. But you see, you could never find Israelis, be it in Riyadh, in Dubai, or in the street. So this is it's a good presentation, although it's quite sad that these 3 people were killed. Nevertheless, it actually portrays quite well that Egypt and Israel have a quite good relationship. Nevertheless, they had, I think, 3 wars, and they were quite bloody.
Okay. Coping. Something to add?
Oh yeah. First of all, thank you, Shadowi, and also thank you, Prata. I'm always a fan of when you set the stage so well with the history stuff. I would actually have wanted to respond more to that, but I was so busy looking up a few other stuff, and I was just I figured I would focus more on a few facets of the question regarding Egypt's political and military strength vis-a-vis Israel, which I'm not sure. Are we going to change over to that side of the topic, or it was mentioned?
No, the comparison is interesting because it's about the news. And earlier, I looking on Wikipedia about the military strength of both countries, and look at the numbers. For Egyptian army, the active personnel is basically more than 400,000, and for the Israeli army, the active personnel is maybe 1/3 of the numbers. For the active personnel, you have 1/3 difference, but the problem is the budget. The budget
well, so you're saying that
Israeli is 24 billion in 21.
Did I hear you correctly? You said
Egypt is basically 5 billion. So it's 1 to 5 for the budget.
Yeah, because the population difference is also quite stark. When we say 9 million, this also includes about 1.5 to 2 million so-called Arab Israelis who are actually Palestinians in many regards. So when they are not necessarily to be counted in the military context. So when you then take Egypt, which is closer to 100 million, it's a pretty stark contrast. Like they have maybe they have 3 times the size of standing army, but they have way more than 10 times the size of the population pool. And then you can also look at the military budget. I think in that regard, if you could close that, I'll try to share from my side. I took up some graphs.
Stop sharing. Sharing, no, you could do it.
Yeah, let me see if I can. It will be this one here. Okay, so give me one moment. Let's just do some comparisons here when it comes to proportions, right? So I'm going to look here at Israel's GDP. It's as of 2022, it's over 500 billion. Now, I tried to look one up here for the Egypt, but the only one that told me here, the quick one, was non-available. So if someone can look it up for me, that would be nice. But now, this is the gross number of its GDP, over 500 billion. As of its military spending, it's up to 24 billion. If you can see on the upper graph, that is Israel's military budget of 2021, I think. Now, if you look on the lower bar, it will show the percentage of its GDP being 5.7. And I saw that actually on the Wikipedia page that Shadowi had put up. It was exactly the same. Now, if you put it in the context of the amount of aid that Israel gets, and I will show this very soon, it is $3 to $4 billion. No, so that means that you go from here to there, basically. This is the relevance of the financial aid from the U.S. to Israel. It goes from here, 24 to 21, maybe 20 here, you can say. So the difference is from currently 5.7 to 5.11. And it is also important to note that the financial aid from the U.S. is actually not geopolitically important. It is important for those who want to look into the corruption that is the biggest money laundering machine, the Pentagon. But geopolitically, it clearly here, as I can show you here, just monetarily speaking, it doesn't really make much of a dent. And it also makes even less of a dent because that money which is given is earmarked for US military aid. This I will put into context now to Egypt. It looks a little bit more lively, this graph here, maybe. But so here it says the military budget per 2021 is a little more than 5 billion. And I will show it up a little bit later here. The aid from the US, total financial aid, is 1 billion, which means it goes not down here, but it actually goes down more or less down here. So given the rise of its budget, so if the US were to cut aid to Egypt, it will go from 1.3 to pretty much 1.2. This is basically the reason I'm showing this is so people can understand that the financial aid from the US, well, certainly not something to be just overlooking. You get free military hardware after all. This is more like on a surface level. It is the access to military weapons that makes both Egypt and Israel in effect allies of the US. So let's see, the US aid to Israel is as per now, and this started as of 2016. It's something that an agreement signed by Barack Obama and reinforced by Trump later. And of course, Biden is not going to do anything about that. And it says here the overall package of 3.8 billion US dollars over basically 10 years. So close to 4 billion, $3.8 billion in pure financial aid. And I'm not sure if this is the strictly military one, because I know usually this number has been, 10 years ago, it was 3 billion, but then it was about 60% military and 40% for civilian assets. Now, this is BBC, by the way. Okay, so, if you want to say fake news, I will say legacy news. So I mentioned here the US aid to Israel in the context of Israel's military budget and its GDP. Here we have actually Egypt, and this is from CNN. So, I mean, if you say fake news, again, I say legacy news. This was a bit interesting and I was not aware of. The article is of September 14, 2023 this year. So that is a month ago. It says US will redirect millions of funds for Egypt. Okay, so how much does Egypt actually get? The US provides more than 1 billion in foreign military financing. Now, again, this is military financing, likely earmarked for a US military expenditure. Though it does says here, the vast majority of it is not conditional, which of course lends itself for quite a lot of avenues for corruption. We should keep in mind that while Israel is certainly a very militarized state, it is also a parliamentary state. And while every state, shall we say, prime minister and so forth has to have had military service and so forth. In Egypt, it is direct military rule in essence. It is the military is infused actually quite public as well on every single facet of its economy. So, this could also be a tacit bribe, if you want to look at it like that, a slush fund for the elites or the military elites, whatnot. But the point is that it's 1 billion, right? And it's financing. And it's not, and we have seen already that the numbers don't really matter that much. I mean, we can go back to Egypt as well. If the proportion is barely 1% of its GDP, we'll go back to Israel, 5%. Well, okay, that's 5 times higher, but you can definitely jack it up. And the money doesn't actually matter that much. It is the access, after all, that matters. So, yeah, well, here's another interesting thing that I will end with here, having put that into context, because like the headline said, the US will redirect the millions of funds, the significance of which, I think may be for this topic or later, but it's up to 230, no, sorry.
I just have a question, Coping. I'm sorry to cut you, but
sure.
Is it really important that the money come from US?
Yes, because it is the biggest recipient, it's the biggest contributor for both countries.
Yes.
And also because many countries, well, because the relationship between the U.S. and these two countries as allies, right? Israel and Egypt may not be allies, but they are technically speaking, in much regards, allies to the U.S. because of these military financing, direct military
So
financing.
to keep the focus on Egypt, you
Mhm.
think
it's quite
the fact
interesting
that
to
the US
notice.
give a lot of money to military Egyptian means that basically the US State Department has a say in the diplomatic decision of Egypt. I don't see
I
so.
should remember, because Coping was just saying it. Since Sisi is on the power, because somehow Morsi was a project of the United States, and they were not very happy that the military made the coup. Egypt has been under sanctions. Yes, many of their military, they have been reducing their military aid all the time. Well, this is actually these news that they cut or they transferred that intended military aid to Egypt to Taiwan. Which was the other country? Taiwan and
Lebanon.
Lebanon.
Yes.
Yes, but I don't think Egypt. That doesn't make Egypt a complete ally from the United States. Actually, I feel this is more like the United States trying to buy Egypt. And let's remember Nasser again. Nasser got $2 million back then, which was a huge amount of money. They were trying to buy Nasser into joining the Western alliance against the Soviet Union. He took the money, and then he was in the conference of Bandung and ignored and started to deal with the Soviets, if I make myself understand. And we see Mubarak
today.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
they
exactly.
go to the USA and they go to the BRICS.
Most of the aid is not even military, but most aid is their bribes. It's basically bribing an influential part of the elite of whatever country. So Morsi was definitely a U.S. puppet. I mean, the dude wasn't even in presidency for a long time. The guy was brought to Harvard to give a speech about, I don't know what, I can't remember. And the elites were clapping, and I'm like, holy cow, this guy's just brought a Muslim Brotherhood guy in front of Harvard and clap for him. But they're bribes. Even when you hear, oh, the United States said it's going to cut aid to Uganda, that aid does not go to the people of Uganda. It does not. That goes, whatever aid comes in, all politicians are with their calculators trying to figure out what their percentage will be, you know. And then they pay it back. You know, if it's like financial aid that they have to pay back, they pay back, but they're aware that the average citizen is too busy to keep up with what's going on, right? So we got military aid. They're not going to go look for where does the money actually go. Oh, we are paying back aid we're given by the United States. Why are we paying it? Where did it start? People don't think about that. So in other words, they get the money, they use it, and then they use taxpayers' money to pay back the aid. You know, it's a very functioning form of corruption.
It's quite interesting, the map you put it in.
Yeah, I forgot actually this little thingy here. Let me just finish with my little spiel that I had. So we can see here on the left side. Oops, let me see. I thought I was going to get a marker here. Okay. You can see my cursor. The United States is indisputably the biggest trading partner, interestingly. The second biggest is Greece. Turkey, not so surprising, but Greece being a small country. It does also speak to the potential power of mediation, as I alluded to pre-recording, that Egypt might have, but that's a different topic. What I would like to point out, though, is that one, the biggest trading partner you have tend to be a very good indicator of who has the most influence on you. So this is one of the reasons why...
I totally disagree with that.
Well,
the first USA trading partner is China, and they have no influence in USA.
Well, China here is 2.6% of Egypt's export value. right? And I'm talking export value, not necessarily import. That, of course, is also important. But I'm talking about, for the sake of brevity, okay? So I'm dealing with the exports only. And the main export market for Egypt, well, that's actually the United States. China doesn't factor much in; it's a quarter of it. But more interestingly, and I think this is hard for you guys to see. It's hard for me to see. So I'm gonna.
Oh.
This is Israel. It's 0.3%. This is Palestine, twice the trade. So we can, from that, to some extent, surmise that there are some tangible, real connections between Egypt and Palestine, between pure purchasing link and stuff like that. But it also shows that both Egypt and Israel do have trade. I mean, after all, it may be very small, but you have to put things into context. Small countries as well, compared to the biggest ones here. And well, I'm not sure if
I'm a little bit lost. I'm a little bit lost.
Yes,
so,
I don't agree with you, Keeping, on this.
So wait, so when you say that their biggest export trading partner between Egypt for Egypt is the United States, is that true?
Well, according to
I don't see it that way. It's actually the European Union. The United States. Actually, if you look at the
yes, but European Union is
it's a very
well, if you look at the number,
it's a very balanced.
Yeah,
it's a very balanced. It's a very balanced. It's a very balanced trade. Let's say there is no single country that represents more than 10%. So if you lose that 10% of your exports, you're quite well. Well, it depends on what I think they probably re-export to the United States. So this is something else because you see, Egypt has some oil production, but their most exported product is refined oil in a very big number. So I presume they are re-exporting actually oil that they get and refined. And that's probably where the United States comes in because the United States. I'm actually
curious what they actually sell to the United States. So you think it's refined oil, like refined petroleum products?
Yes, I think so. Yes, most probably.
So why take it all the way to the United States while India is right next door and is actually more hungry than the United States?
Because of contract.
Oh, India is a big refiner.
You have to follow it.
Makiadi, India is a big refiner. Okay. Yes, exactly. They refine and export in big quantities.
But that's the reason why that surprises me is that the United States is so far away from Egypt, and the United States is a huge producer of oil itself, probably the biggest in the world. Mm-hmm. So I wonder why they don't.
They have a problem with refining. It has to do with the types of oils you have. So some oils produce more gasoline, and some oils produce more diesel. For instance, the Russian Urals or the Middle East oils, most of them, especially the heavy ones, produce more diesel. Mm-hmm. And the United States, I think, has a problem with diesel, so they have to import a lot of diesel.
Okay, makes sense.
If I'm not mistaken, I hope I didn't say anything, but I know the United States has one
problem. Another thing, please. It's about the company. Maybe there is a U.S. company who has oil in Saudi Arabia and export to Egypt. But it's a U.S. company, so it counts as a U.S. export.
Coping just has to show us the same graphic for imports. Because actually, it depends on how much negative, because I know it's negative, it's the payments balance of Egypt. That will tell us a lot. But the imports would actually, if the payments balance is negative, imports says more than exports.
I think you could click on import.
You asked for. Did you ask for the import-export balance between Egypt and US?
No, we could do that, but I mean in global terms, the imports.
On the previous page, you have a button to click for import. Sorry.
Did you mean on
Click the
the?
same page, and on the page with the
He means the graph you had before on the screen.
yes, with the graph you had
Yeah,
before.
okay.
On the left side, yes, here, import.
Okay.
Oh, things changed picture, didn't they?
And
Things
there we
changed
go,
picture
China.
a lot.
Well, hard as
Things
surprising.
changed. Yes, but very
China,
important.
Russia.
Very important. What do the Egyptians buy from the Chinese so much?
Cars. They are buying cars. No, I don't know.
They are
pretty
buying
much
machinery.
Oh my God, they're buying everything like everybody else. Oh my God.
Yes,
If you go to a hardware store in any Western country, their whole hardware store is China. Like China, literally, the whole Walmart is China. Everything is China.
But
I
heavy
would like
machinery
to
is
show you guys
to
one thing. I want to show you
for
guys one
countries.
thing. Do you notice one thing? This is like these are Middle Eastern and this is Asia basically, which is the biggest continent. So this makes sense, right? And then you have Eurasia. This is the distinction they have made here, because you see here there are Oman, but then you have Turkey and China, right? So this is Asia in a sense with the Middle East, and then here you have Eurasia. Now, this is Africa. This is the import they have from the continent they are on. And this is, this is not surprising. But United States is still a pretty big player. Of the one in the North Americas, it is the player. The ones don't really register. It's the United States still. And I'm not really sure. I'm trying to see if I can find any country. Like, I can't read the countries here. Zambia is the only country I can read.
Africa was never ever supposed or designed to be anything to do with value addition in any goods. They're supposed to be just raw materials extraction, pull the earth apart, cut the trees down, kill the elephants, take the tusks.
Fair enough, but isn't it interesting that Zambia, of all countries in the African continent, it's not Sudan, it's not Libya or Chad, it's Zambia that happens to be the biggest country that Egypt imports from.
That's more than likely like a deal they came up with, because Zambia is landlocked.
Be careful, the door is so small that it could change from one year to another.
You probably, if you click on that country, you will see whatever they are buying from them. If you click, and they probably will open a table with what is coming from.
Zambia is a big producer of copper. That's right. It's one of the biggest world producers of copper. That makes a lot of sense.
So that's what we should have done with the United States and China.
Okay, but let's check the United States then. So soybeans. This is what and vaccines. What do you know? This is going to be interesting for some. Petroleum gas, scrap iron even.
Scrap, yeah, probably.
Here is aircraft parts. I'm not sure. Let's say tanks, armored vehicles. Here's the military
aircraft parts make a lot of sense in military stuff, because they have a lot of American
hardware.
I take it this is machines, right? It's cars, it's basically machines they're talking. But here we can see aircraft parts and tank and armored vehicles. I'm sure aircraft parts kind of come under the military facet of it.
But it actually could be like, because I mean the biggest seller of passenger planes is Boeing and Airbus. Is Boeing, right? So it could be even their domestic fleet being, but it could even be that they're buying parts for their domestic fleet.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, I ran into another website here that's really, you know how people like comparing things side by side on YouTube, like this versus this. So I ran into this.
You want to put the screen down so you can put up yours?
So from China is mobiles.
No, anytime.
Hoping, could you go back to exports? Could you go back to exports and click on the United States, since we were wondering what is the United States buying from Egypt?
This is exports to United States from Egypt.
Well, refined products, like I guessed. test. It was obvious.
Yeah, you're actually right on that.
And
Very
textile.
big one. Yeah, textile.
And
Egypt has been known for
I
that for a
almost
long
guessed textiles. I didn't say it, but I was thinking textiles, but I'm wrong.
Oh,
It's
it's quite
petroleum.
true.
Well, I mean, both Egypt and India are like countries that have been like for all of these are ancient civilizations, and both of them have been known for textiles for like that's one of the things that define them. So it's hardly surprising it still remains. Cotton production,
And I
believe,
think there is a local production of textile raw product, basically.
I think all
it
this
was on the
green
open mic.
is
On the open mic, someone made a comment about Egypt not being able to feed their own population, and I said having to buy grains from outside, and I said, yeah, but the Egyptians are producing other agriculture stuff. They're actually more valuable than grains. Yes. They can buy grains from elsewhere. Of course, grains now are very expensive, and this is questioning their ability to sustain their food independence. And that's also why Sisi is so engaged in making that huge irrigation project that will create 20% more arable land for Egypt.
Well, and also so I've had this comment before. Somebody says, if you're buying food from outside, that means you can't feed your people. That's not true. If you're buying it from outside, that means you're actually still feeding your people. You know, if your country can't grow rice and your people like rice, then it makes sense that you'd buy it from outside. If you can afford it, then that means, you know, you can still feed your people.
I would like to show you, if you can see Saudi Arabia. This is the exports to Saudi Arabia refined petroleum. Very interesting, considering that Saudi Arabia is the biggest producer as far as that most can be concerned.
That is not very surprising, because one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil is Saudi Arabia. And mainly because Russian oil is cheaper than their oil. The type of crude is cheaper than their crude. So they buy Russian oil, use it domestically, and then sell theirs outside.
The thing is that Saudi Arabia would have the ability to produce more, but it makes no sense to make investments on the production of oil. At this time, nobody is doing it.
But this is Egypt's exports to Saudi Arabia. So I'm not sure, Makiadi, how do you square that one?
Well, unless so. These are mostly intra-company deals, right? So they don't always have to make sense. So a company may buy something from you because it's cheaper for them to buy from you than it is for them to make it, or they have better things to do with like their money and their planning. So they'll buy from you only because of a certain deal. So it may be something like that. Secondly, I came to understand that they're different. So to mine oil in Russia is cheaper than to mine oil in Saudi Arabia for various reasons, geology, blah, 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 all that stuff. So this may be, again, a deal between one company and another, and they may actually be working together. It may actually be the same company in both countries.
Yeah. What are you showing us now? It is the agriculture project, right?
No.
The artificial river.
That's the data, and there is a new area that they want to develop. On the satellite, you could see there is only sand here. And I think they want in the red line, it's a new canal, basically, to allow to irrigate the desert.
Is that an underground canal, or is it on the ground?
Don't know. It's both. It's pipelines, water pipelines, and river. But I think the map is not very well done. You probably will find another one, because actually they are reverting water that was just about to go to the sea, and it comes back inside of the land, if I saw it correctly.
Say that again?
I think it's water that was just about to go to the ocean, to the sea, that is diverted to inside of the land.
Okay.
So that's why also the project is amazing. in terms
So
of
that means they have to do a lot of digging in order to
yes,
keep
and
the level
pipelines
flowing.
and pumping water elevated again. Sorry again.
And they want, if you look at this map, it's very interesting. It's the density of the population. So they want to use an area where there is basically no people.
Yes, of course.
On the
No people,
west part
free
of
land.
the delta.
Yeah, no people, free land, empty spaces. Yes, it's intelligent. And if you guys remember our Niger recording, I talked about that dam they are planning, and exactly the same huge agricultural potential. They are going to reclaim water from the desert. Oh, that's a new delta, exactly that. I don't know if you can see the channel,
Delta,
because there are many
delta.
channels, side channels, pumping stations. The new delta, exactly. So bringing water just to the desert. Yeah, amazing.
That's pretty cool. Now that you see a project like that,
If they succeed,
you
it's going to be
start
pretty
asking
cool. But I
yourself,
think they're
how
going
come
to
it
need
was
a
not
lot of
done
money.
before? You know,
Makiadi.
And with this lot of money, we could bring back to
$10
the
billion.
BRICS.
This is 2 months war in Ukraine. $10 billion, and they are going to change the desert in such a huge amount.
actually, that's not a lot of money. Actually,
Yeah.
10 billion. They'll be able to pay that, and that will pay itself in future so many times over.
The
That's way
China
worth
could
it.
pay for it.
Yep.
Maybe that's why they are in BRICS. They are looking for money for the project. It could be one of the reasons, because there is a lot of reasons, of course.
Yeah, and as long as they have done all their homework and they have figured out that the project will actually work, that this is not going to be a failure, I mean, I don't see a problem with them getting a fat loan for that.
They are building it. They are really building it. It's impressive.
Oh, okay.
They are probably already halfway. It's impressive. They are really doing it. And when you see from videos from it, you look like, whoa, what they are doing, like open huge amounts of lands, huge pipelines, like 5 huge pipelines for pumping water. It's quite impressive what they are doing.
Oh,
and also building a new capital.
And not to distract you guys from it, but just a side thing here. Oh, you had that Burkina Faso is building a nuclear power plant. And And I love the headlines from Europe. Oh, they were so awesome, just like you'd expect them. Is this the right decision? Is this the right time, though? Should they not focus on something else?
I would like to have that conversation differently. But one thing mentioned about the 10 billion, what you said, 10 billion is not much. It's easy to get a fat loan for that. And you're right. I totally agree with you, because China is having excess amount of US dollars, which it cannot store in the US anymore. It doesn't feel safe storing it. That's why it's dumping treasury bonds in exchange for gold, but it can only do so much of it. It's trading some of its treasury bonds to less risky one and trying to then push over. Well, here it comes. This is why we're seeing quite a lot of the investments that nominally speaking would not often make sense. Like they put themselves in a position where they are very liable to get at a loss, but they don't really care, because they need to just get this stored anyways, and they have clauses in their deals that make them able to at least, like, they won't go at a complete loss, and they will be able to gain political capital. Sure, it can always be spinned around. This happens a lot, but if you look at Egypt here, 10 billions, that's peanuts. The NDB via BRICS, where China was the main contributor, they took 10 billion to South Africa and then another 10 billion to South Africa for ESCOM alone, a company, just a company, not a project like this, just to make them so.
There's a high possibility this sort of a project is vital for the survival of Egypt itself, especially in the future, right? And so at that point, it basically makes the project priceless. Like, it's something you definitely have to do. Otherwise, if Egypt keeps buying most of its food from outside, like it's doing right now, it will always be hostage to the market system. Every time there's a conflict, then they have to rush around to figure out how they're going to feed their people. So even if they have money, it's still not reliable. Oh,
it's quite true.
and you guys have
We all
seen
agree with
that
that
China
today,
has
to be
invested a ton of
independent with food production is really a strength for a country.
yes, and you've seen China has invested like a lot on like greenhouses. I don't know whether you guys have seen the videos of greenhouses in Egypt. Holy crap! It's like a whole. I don't even know how to explain it, but you see greenhouses disappearing into the horizon. Like
Yes.
they have built a lot of kind of things.
Egypt is a big supplier of fresh vegetables to Europe. We see, and this is growing more, especially because Spain, which used to be also one of the biggest suppliers of vegetables to Europe, together with the Netherlands. Very strange why the Netherlands, but it's true. They also have huge areas covered with greenhouses, but they sucked all the water, so there is no more water in the underground now. And of course, these projects in Egypt make a lot of sense because there is no potential in Europe anymore for those in Southern Europe at least, since the water is becoming more and more scarce. Actually, Portugal is in a draw now, and the Spanish are begging the Portuguese to have compassion of them and give them more water. It's impressive. We don't have rivers that go to Spain. I don't even know how they expect us to give them water, but they are begging for water. It's impressive. Normally, rivers come from Spain to Portugal, not the other way around.
I would like now to speak about the third part of our talk, about what could Egypt do to influence the situation. Because we have speak about their strength, about their weakness. We have speak about Egypt a lot, but in the local area around their own country, are they going to be strong enough or smart enough to influence the situation? Who want to go first?
My point was picking up what Makiadi said. The investments of China in Africa. We saw in this Belt and Road Initiative an attempt from China to integrate more Arab and African countries in the Belt and Road Initiative. We saw Putin making a case for the next BRICS that he wants to develop trade corridors like the international North and South transport corridor between Russia and India. And this corridor is actually advancing to the neighbor countries. Very interestingly, the Chinese noticed how successful the North-South corridor was, and now are trying to actually come into it. And the idea would be to create a kind of a middle corridor that doesn't just go from Iran to Turkey, but also go back to Iraq and probably to Egypt. And so transport corridors, yes, it's somehow a future for the area. We also saw all these countries in the Persian Gulf getting ready to make more deal within themselves. So increasing the regional globalization. We see the same happening in many parts of Africa, less successfully. But we saw during the G20, the European Union and the US trying to convince the Gulf monarchies to create a corridor between India and Europe that would be connected by sea to Saudi Arabia, then from train to Israel, Haifa, Jordan and Israel, and then from boat again to Europe. Makes no sense because it's much faster to go by boat. But in terms of regional connection, it makes a lot of sense. But now with the war in Gaza, I don't think this will have any future. But the idea might be rescued by the Saudis and make corridors not to Israel, but to Syria and Lebanon, or even to Egypt. Bit difficult to Egypt, but it could be possible.
No, you just have to use a sea travel
Or a
from
bridge.
Saudi Arabia to Egypt. You don't
The
have
Tower
to
Room,
create new things.
the Tower Room, one of the reasons for the Suez crisis, actually, for Israel, was to oblige to open the Tower Room Strait, which is in the Sinai, near to St. Catherine's, Sharm el-Sheikh, exactly on these are the 13 kilometers. Actually, they could build a bridge.
That would be interesting, but I don't know if it would be useful.
Yes, of course. So
bringing us back to what can we do with what can Egypt do? I mean, with the situation in Israel-Palestine, for example, because I believe that was what you were asking, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah, we are
And
tangent.
the third question I think a lot of people have is about the Gaza population and why Egypt is strictly refusing to accept a new wave of civilian fleeing Gaza, basically.
well, if I may start
these
with
2 million person, where are they going to go? If it's
no,
Egypt?
that's not the problem, Shadowi. I think
Yes.
I realize the problem is that there is a big cooperation between Israel and Egypt in terms of exploration of gas together. And if we look at Gaza, it's in the middle of that big fields. And Gaza used to be Egypt, used to be controlled by Egypt until it was occupied by Egypt exactly in the Suez crisis. And the thing is, if Egypt actually allows Israel to expel all the population from Gaza and even take control of it informally, then Egypt would lose a potential part of their share in the gas fields in that area.
There it is.
So did I understand you correctly, Prata? You would say that because of basically the Palestinians say somewhat, shall we say, inherent, right, for lack of better words, to the gas field, and them being, as shown earlier, they are closer trading partners to Egypt than Israel is, for understandable reasons, at least when it comes to exports. And so what you said here is that, let's say, Israel ethnically cleanses or somehow just seizes complete control, so the Palestinians are no longer a factor. That would make Egypt lose out. Or because, as far as I could tell, it could just as well be the other way. I mean, with the Palestinians there, they would like to have their own agreements, right? Of course, that would make sense on the surface. It's probably a better trading partner in some sense for Egypt to have the Palestine. But the fact of the matter is that Palestine doesn't have actual sovereignty over the resources, and this is problematic for Egypt. If Egypt really wants the gas, and if that is what matters, then it's really, okay, whatever gives me the gas, right?
I was talking about the potential of Egypt regaining sovereignty over the gas strip. It's always there, but the moment Israel takes over it, it's gone forever.
Oh, so you're saying that as long as Gaza remains the way it is right now, Egypt still has the potential of having access to those gas fields in the future, right?
Yes.
If
Oh.
I
Well,
look
they
at
have
the map
access
that we have
now,
here,
but they don't
there
have
is no
that big
country
share.
in.
Yes, let me ask
maybe
you
there
guys.
is, but
Let me ask
there
you guys.
is.
What do you guys mean? But I need to ask you guys. I need to ask you, what do you guys mean by access? Because they could always access it for example, imports. They could probably do that with Israel as well. They cooperate with them already. So what do you mean by access? Like they have control and they can preferentially
Israel and Egypt decided to, because these are difficult sea boundaries, they decided to share the profits of the exploration from these gas fields. And there is existing Egyptian offshore infrastructure. So like you see there. So the thing is, if Gaza disappears as Israeli, it means that Israel, as Israeli territory, it means that Israel will have a bigger share of these gas fields. They are still being developed. They haven't been all developed at all. And
Right. So
the same...
you're not actually talking, so we're not really talking so much about commodity access. We are talking about basically share, like interest, like fees, basically.
Yes, yeah.
But
Exactly.
how substantial are they, though? I mean, fees are I know there's money, but there's not. It's not the main commodity. It's not the main buyer or anything. It's a part of the production chain. So how big is that really? Like to incentivize Egypt, because Egypt has quite a lot of cooperations, right? So I think it's a valid question.
Wait,
when
Prata,
we talk about money,
hey, Prata, don't you mean reserves? You mean reserves, right? You're talking about reserves, that the area has potential gas reserves, right?
yes, huge ones.
That have
You
not
see in
been
the map,
explored, huge ones. Okay.
explored,
Okay.
yes. They are still trying. They're still.
But they have not
they
been
are
exploited
starting it.
yet.
No, it's because it's a lot of problems. The Turks want parts of it. Everybody wants a little bit of it. Yeah. Lebanon also has a lot of contested area until it is actually decided, or there is a deal between the partners. Until there is a deal between the partners, no company will actually invest in that gas fields. So we see, for instance, that the gas fields between Lebanon and Israel, and you see the area contested, you see that nobody is going there to make explorations. But between Egypt and Israel, they already started.
I'm just going to change something in your speech, in your talk. They are going there. They are just not putting the result on the map. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people understand what is under the water. They just don't want to put it on the map.
I was about to say thank you, Shadowi, because the thing with the gap,
look at how the field stop directly at the border. I don't think
they don't know yet
the gas is also Palestinian water.
It goes
Shadowi,
directly to Egypt.
I don't think those borders are solid. Like they haven't been decided completely yet. I think they're all still disputed one way or another.
I can refer to this as a historical matter when this started a long time. And this was actually it wasn't unknown. Actually, you guys know Yasser Arafat. No, this guy's like he died in late 90s, early 2000 or something like that. I don't recall. It doesn't really matter. Well, anyways, back then it was known that there were gas fields and what like the ones we're seeing now. Some of them were discovered actually later, but they were already known, those that were outside of Gaza. And one of the things that was that the Palestinians, or maybe PLO, I should say, did not accept investigating for drilling or like what are the reserves and so forth before they got, and this is understandable, of course, before they actually had a set prior deal to it. And because, of course, they haven't been acquired any legal guarantees or any substantial guarantees whatsoever, they have generally not been accepting any form of searches going on in that area, which is represented clearly on the map here. This is within the jurisdiction. But like Shadowi just said, and I am inclined to think the same, it's probably been quite a lot of searches and not put on the map because you cannot actually legally show it on the map, but you can physically go and investigate without, for example, the Palestinians making a fuss of it because they're already held and shot by Israel, and Israel doesn't mind because they want a piece of the cake too. So yeah, well, without getting too conspiratorial, but that's what we're seeing.
The problem is that if you start any sort of works near anywhere Palestine holds, nobody wants to invest their money there because if the Palestinians are not okay with it, it may get attacked. And most companies, that means your insurance payments will be through the roof for all your employees. It will be too much of a risk for almost anybody. to
It
want
will
to invest
go.
there.
It
Yes,
will.
when it comes to
It will go
investment.
to international courts. I remember
Sure. But
the
wait,
East Timor versus
before you
Australia.
continue,
Exactly the same.
please, Prata, before you continue, because to the point that Shadowi was making as a matter of exploration, because what you're saying, Makiadi, is absolutely true when it comes to investment and then subsequent development. But as a matter of exploration, that doesn't necessarily apply here.
Well,
And this,
I'm assuming
this is important.
most of the exploration has already been done, right?
Yes.
Yes, and this is important, right? Because when you have the exploration, then you can also, to some extent, prove the incentive. Maybe you cannot do this public, but you can make backdoor deals with, hey, so how about you support us in this and that direction? Which, how it affects the dynamic with for example, those in charge in Gaza, or PLO or whatever, I don't know. But I think it's worth putting into consideration because it has been explored regardless of consent. It can still be used as a bribe by those who have that information at hand.
I mean, almost anything and almost everything is possible. But Prata's point was that if Egypt gets a foothold in Gaza stronger than the one they have, that gives them an upper hand with the claims for those resources, for those gas fields. So
but one moment, that
and we're talking about the future. We're not talking about 5 years from now. So these countries think like 100 years from now. These countries think like 100
let me
years
take
from
now. Let me take now as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we are presupposing that Egypt is automatically an ally of Gaza. Well, I think it's
no. That's not what I'm saying. That was not the point. That was not the point.
No. Hold on.
Gaza, the Gaza Strip used to be.
No, the implication. Wait, let me finish. The implication is that Gaza would be automatically beholden to Egypt. That's not necessarily true. They have a lot of contention due to Egypt-Israeli cooperation and vice versa. It's a very great.
If you give them, if you allow, the question was,
wait, Prata, please. I'm one sentence away from finishing, right? You have to consider who is the easiest one for Egypt to negotiate with. Who can they negotiate with, right? Right. So for Egypt, it doesn't actually matter if it's the Palestinian authorities or Israel. That's the only thing. I'm done.
No, but I'm okay. The problem was here why Egypt doesn't allow the Israelis to make evacuation to Egypt of all the population of Gaza. And I said, because that would mean that somewhere in time, Israel would claim those lands for them. They would annex it. If they are empty, I assure you, like in the Golan Heights, they will annex these lands. Actually, that's what exactly they are going to do with the north part of Gaza right now. Now it's my time to make my last sentence.
Sorry.
So the point is, if Israel claims these lands for them, then they will start officially exploring these areas, not just exploring, taking those resources. They are ready.
Look at this map. There is a Gaza Marine field.
Okay, we are here with some semantics. You mean exploring, looking at prospecting, looking at where are the resources, and I was saying exploring, like taking them out.
Okay.
Yes. So the thing is that now they can't do it. It's not important neither for Israel nor really for Egypt because they have a lot of it. But Israel and Israel have came to an accord that all these fields within these areas which are not defined, and also many of the fields are between both countries, that they have a share on the resources taken out. So if you just give Gaza to Israel officially almost, then they will have a bigger share. But if Gaza stays like independent, that one thing, or even the perspective of Egypt getting back Gaza to themselves, doesn't matter in which time in the future, it means that Egypt at least has an upper hand to negotiate with the Israelis in a better condition. It doesn't matter if they have a better relationship with Gaza or not. At this moment, no company.
I just want to briefly respond to that, and because I actually agree, but I want to add a caveat here, because it's exactly true what you're saying. It's a matter of negotiation. What do they agree with? But this is precisely my point. What matters for Egypt is who they can agree with here. And if, let's say, part of the agreement was that Egypt absorbed the population from Gaza, I don't really think that's going to happen anytime soon. It's a very big, tall order. Even for Egypt. But let's say they did that, and they did this as a part of an agreement that, okay, but then you're going to give us preferential shares to the natural resources outside of that shore. And so this could be a part of the dynamic as well. Like why, for example, Egypt could choose, or let's put it like this, to get back to topic, how Israel could have an upper hand on influencing Egypt to not actually do anything with the situation in a beneficial way for the people of Gaza. And then, of course, I think
if you look at this map, these two fields called Noah and Mario Blue, I can imagine that many, because this is not in Israeli firms digging. You see, these are international big enterprises, and they don't want to have problems with justice. I was going to give the example of East Timor and Australia, when Australia was actually taking out resources from the waters, the territory waters of East Timor, and didn't want to pay, and they were sued, and East Timor was won. And of course, the companies had to pay money that they already paid to Australia, and they had to pay it twice. You see what I mean? So no company wants to have, ExxonMobil, Total, and so on. No company wants to invest in a field that is problematic, where there is not a deal that allows them to legally explore those resources. That was the point. And for Egypt, it's more or less clear that maintaining the situation is in their favor, because the situation may be they may get possession of those fields and take a bigger share from Israel, from the exploration, because this is already between both countries. And what we see in this map is already critical, is that Israel claimed their economic zone to be all Gaza inside.
Yep.
And also, so here's the thing also is that, so Gaza is important to Egypt for many reasons, but that is definitely one of the main reasons. So for sure, Egypt does not gain by Israel taking over Gaza in any way. It definitely does not gain. And they don't actually, to the earlier point, they don't actually have to have total control over Gaza. I don't think politically they would want to touch that issue with the 10-foot pole. It's a very volatile area to deal with. It may cause problems in future. So
wait,
just
are you
having
talking Israel or Egypt when it comes to you said control of
Egypt, yeah. So they at this point they wouldn't want direct control of Egypt.
No. They will not. I can assure you, they won't. They've already relinquished it. They've already politically relinquished that. That's a part of a peace deal with Israel. So, I mean, that's a big escalation if they want to do that.
I'm aware of that. But the point is, I'm saying that they would not want to directly control it. So, if anything else, they would like to have much more indirect control of the area than they do at this moment. Now, are they going to take in 1 million refugees? No, they will not. So what's happening right now with all these Arab countries, and especially Egypt, is they are buying time to see what happens in the situation. Eventually, they'll have to act. The reason why they have to act, if you go on YouTube right now, you see the protests that are in Egypt. None of the Arab countries want to deal with that mess. That mess can take a whole other direction. Eventually, they have to act, even if they're only acting to appease the masses, they'll do it. But right now, they're all waiting, and Israel has this window of time.
And one of the problems of Egypt is that if they let the the population of Gaza died from hunger, thirst, or even from the Israeli bombs, one of the things that the masses are going to ask them is to accept the refugees. And it's going to be very hard for Egypt to refuse.
It will be very comfortable to have a claim of genocide over Israel. And the Israelis have not noticed the biggest mistake they are doing.
Israel of genocide if you close the border?
Yes, you can, of course.
You can do
everything. And
I actually know how they're going to sell.
Shadowi makes a good point. Shadowi makes a good point.
No, it is not.
No, yes, he makes a very good
point.
No, he makes an excellent point. If you close the border to the place that is being genocided, can you really be considered to be... You are obviously complicit.
No. Coping. You would have to act. I think that the Convention on Genocide would oblige the neighboring countries to invade Israel.
No. Then you close the border, you're complicit in the genocide. But if you do not close the border, what do you have then? You have traditional ethnic cleansing with a bunch of people fleeing the violence into Egypt, and Egypt accept it. Either accept them...
There have been statements made... There have been statements made by like Egyptian officials, like on Telegram and stuff, and they have said that, this is how I would have sold it anyways, closing the border. That if they open the border and those guys leave, they would literally be responsible for assisting Israel to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And Putin, I think, said something to that effect, or a Russian official, to that effect, that if these people leave, they will not come back. So that means Israel takes that place. So if Egypt is the one that allows them to go across the border, then they would also be responsible for that. And another point also that was made, I was seeing that online, is that if the people who have to leave, and those who refuse to stay, at the end of the day, you're responsible for the killing of those people who agreed to stay, because they will be massacred, because Israel will use the excuse by saying, we told them to leave, these guys are the ones who stayed, and the other ones left. Who allowed the other ones to leave? It was Egypt. I don't think Egypt has a very difficult position trying to sell why they need to keep the border closed. They can still do it and still respect their own people.
That was absolutely awesome, because what you pointed out there is basically for in Egypt's case, damn if you do, damn if you don't. That's basically
exactly.
And I would say
he's losing.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised how the neighboring countries.
The point I was making is that Egypt is able to sell, still keeping the border closed. They're able to sell it. It's not as bad as we think it is. They can actually sell not opening up the border. Because
I wanted to add something in
the children at the border. And the border is going to stay closed. That's going to be very difficult.
By the time it gets there,
cameras are going to be there.
By the time it gets there, I promise you, the rest of the Arab world will take an action or another. So the situation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, it's just in terms. If you look, guys, at the countries that are more vocal, the Islamic countries are more vocal. They are all far away. Iran, Pakistan, even in Indonesia or Malaysia, youth demonstrations, and the Arab countries around, they are being actually quite quiet. Why? Because I think a claim of genocide over Egypt, which the whole world will recognize, because where happened to 2 million people? Yes, Israel. What happened to 2 million people? Where are the people if they all died? What happened? The whole world can't close their eyes because the pictures are there. If they do that, all Arab countries got rid of Israel very easily. It's amazing. And the Convention for Genocide will allow many countries in the world to revenge, which is very sad, because I think it's a beautiful society, nevertheless, what they are doing to the Palestinians. but the whole world will revenge the USA on Israel and use it. They will make blockades. They will make everything that is allowed in the Convention for Genocide. And more than that, also quite interesting, the US has been pressuring Israel, and especially businessmen with Jew origin, to be able to negotiate in Arab countries. We see the Persian monarchies growing economically immensely and being almost forced to recognize Israel. Now they will have a good reason to cut those deals and not allow the big Jewish capital to come and take part on their business. Sorry for being so Machiavellian.
And also, no. Actually, that is very true. The other part about it too is that I don't think there's a nation that wants, including Egypt, I don't think there's a nation that wants a huge armed or potentially armed refugee group in their country. Remember, remember, Syria literally went to war with Palestinian refugees back in the day. So, and that's how countries think. You know, Prata said Machiavellian. Literally, that's how it is when it comes to all these countries and the way they look at things. If you have a huge refugee camp, like Kenya has the highest number of refugees per capita in the world because of the Dadaab and Kakuma, guys coming from the war-torn areas from back in the day, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, right? These guys, you have to be very careful with them because most of these people have experience fighting. So you have to be very careful with them. Otherwise, you may start a whole different kind of problems that you are not ready for. So I don't think Egypt either wants a huge population of 1 million freaking Palestinians in a camp somewhere. I don't think they would want that at all.
And Hamas has already shown the world that they can go very, very far.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that the Egyptian authority don't want them in their own country.
Mm-hmm. So we have covered actually why Egypt will not be allowing Israel to perform ethnic cleansing. But what can they do, like, apart from closing the borders, which is, you know, I mean, this brings a very big moral implication / complication and geopolitical in combination. When you say Egypt blocks the border in order to prevent ethnic cleansing, but they can also you can also, obviously from a geopolitical point of view, you can be cynical and say that they're using it as a tool. But then, okay, we have good reasons I think we've stated pretty good reasons why they will not allow Israel to ethnically cleanse Gaza. But what if they want to prevent it? Because there were arguments for that as well. What can they actually do?
I think they can do multiple things. So first of all, most of these countries make moves. It's like a chessboard. They only make moves as long as they are very sure of something, right? So whatever Israel is doing right now, it's sure that Egypt will not do anything about it. Remember, I think I was saying earlier that one of the Israeli generals had to come up in front of a camera and say that, that the whole idea that Egypt is going to do something about it is fake news. You shouldn't listen to it, right? It doesn't matter. The fact remains, for some reason, that general thinks that Egypt is a potential problem. So Egypt technically, to influence the situation on the ground, doesn't even have to do anything major like mobilize troops. It's literally one negative comment from a very senior person in Egypt can literally make a big difference on the ground. And it's not only Egypt, other nations as well. If they act as if they can do something, they don't even have to do anything. If they actually can do something, it can actually end up influencing something on the ground just by saying, even without taking necessarily any physical action.
That's the problem.
Well, if I can respond to that.
I'm sorry, but the time is running.
Oh, right.
Yes. So we have to speak about some closure. And it's very sad, but I think we are going to speak again about these topics. because it's important and there is a lot of things to say about it. Today we try to look on the side of Egypt, and we are going to speak about this conflict for another side at a point or another. So, Prata, your closure, please.
The thing is that this is a conflict, if we understand what the geopolitics in the Middle East, where countries are finally growing and many conflicts are going down, this conflict is as unwished as possible for most of the countries around Israel. And my point of view about Egypt is that Egypt will definitely stay in the backstage, trying to be as calm as possible. It's also their way of doing things most of the times, at least in their recent history, although they had 3 wars with Israel. Nevertheless, much bigger things are at stage, and they don't want to go to a war. And I would say the same thing for Saudi Arabia, for Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. They are in such a mess. They definitely also don't want to start a war that will be even more destructive than the situation they find themselves in at the moment. And Israel somehow is overreacting their situation, I think in the heat of the moment, also understanding that, like we said, there is a window of opportunity. They can achieve facts on the ground that it won't be lasting much longer. After that, the world will start getting against Israel very soon. But the thing is that in going too far, in not measuring their revenge feelings, they might be actually be framed into a genocide. And in doing so, Israel would lose everything they fought for so many years. They will put themselves into a position that not even the United States can save them from. And that's why I hope that somewhere in time the Israeli politicians understand what they are really planning to do now. It's very bad for themselves, most and foremost. For the Palestinians, this is a tragedy that has not started now. It's a much longer tragedy. Could that have been different? Yes, it could, but we are not here to change history. We are just trying to analyze. I think one thing can also be told. We see in the social media a very extremist reaction to what is happening. People are taking sides, although there is no side really to take. And our panel today, four of us, we show today we are not taking sides. We are just analyzing the situation, how it is. And people should really cool down their heads, because what is happening now is worse for Israel than for anybody else.
Okay, so Makiadi, anything to add? You are mute, Makiadi.
As Prata was speaking, I was just looking at the map and thinking how small of an area that is compared to the rest of the planet.
Oh,
And
yes.
like, holy cow, like we are, the world is almost towards the brink of absolute war because
Look
of
at the side of
tiny
Kenya and the
place.
side of Israel.
I don't know how it became this way, but I think I think at the end of this whole thing, Gaza will still be there. A lot of people would have died, but this, personally, I believe this changes a lot. And regardless of what happens, Israel loses. Israel is the loser here. I'm not talking about militarily. They can go and kill as many people in there, but at the end of the day, they will be the biggest loser. One, their image has been shattered. For generations, what people are going to be remembering. So remember, people forget even people exist, right? So people even forget that Gaza is there. You know, a whole year will pass with billions of people in the world forgetting that Gaza exists. Now everybody's talking about Gaza, right? So it's a disaster for them. I do not blame the Palestinians for sure, because what can they do? So the first time they tried the political process, guess what happened? They lost more land than they've ever lost. Then they tried to protest. They marched. They called something about the March of the Return. But guess what? The Israeli opened fire, killed 200 of them. So what other option do they have? So at the end of the day, I think this is disastrous for Israel either way. Whether they go in with troops or they don't go in with the troops, the disaster has already happened. Not to forget, the rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia now is done, and Saudi Arabia said as much. So yeah.
Okay, Coping, your turn.
Thank you so much, Shadowi, for inviting me, and thank you all the others for yet another very great discussion on yet another very important topic that maybe we may not do so much about it, but it is we need to talk about it at least to understand it. And you cannot do anything before you understand it. I mean, you can do some stuff, but that's probably not going to do much before you actually understand anything. So, as a measure of gratitude to my fellow panelists here and to those of you watching, I hope you consider this to be at least an iterative step into the understanding of the situation, and generally that you appreciate the overall attempted analytical approach we have. We are people after all. We're just like you. So, but if you like these kind of topics like we do, you are highly recommended to try to attend the live streams of the DPA Open Mic on the weekends. Sometimes Saturdays, sometimes Sundays. You can probably click some link in below for the DPA forum and Telegram and whatnot in order to find the more better update. But I want you to understand, this is important, that you understand this. We are not here to lecture you. This is like what Prata said, we are trying to just understand the situation. Yes, we do not have any expertise position. No, we don't have any grand titles. But you should also understand that those people with grand titles, they are still limited by the laws of physics. They have only so much time that they can spend on one place. And there's only so much they can know prior. And when it comes to getting up to date, they are ultimately constrained by the very same constraints we do. They have maybe different insights, yes, they have, and so forth. But, well, that's neither here nor there. That's a different discussion. I hope you will appreciate that we have this conversation. I hope that you will come and join us on the DPA Open Mic on a live stream. And at the very least, you subscribe and have a little bit of look at the videos that are otherwise recorded, including the live streams. And naturally speaking, we would like you a whole lot more if you press that like button than if you didn't. Thank you all for watching the DPA Open Mic. Press that like.
Thank you everybody for watching us. And don't forget to watch everything the DPA channel propose about this situation, because Wyatt is doing a lot of work on this, and I think he deserves your view and your like. So I'm going to thank everybody who come here today, and see you next week, basically.